Hello, this is Werewolf the Podcast, and this is me talking, the werewolf. Well, this is episode 107. Hopefully you've listened to the other Viking episodes from at least 101. That way that you'll kind of know what's going on. We're continuing our journey with the werewolf Sulfen and his human from this Viking time, Thorstein. They're working their ways to being the most famous and most powerful men in the Ostman nation. That's the Vikings. If you don't know what Ostman are, it's Vikings. They're cool, innit? Housekeeping duties need to be done, apparently. I'm supposed to do this at the start of the podcast, not at the end, apparently, because no one apparently listens right to the apparent end. It's a bit rude if you ask me. I always tell you I love you at the end. Anyway, getting on with it. The podcast is going from strength to strength, thanks to those of you listening every week to this stuff. Can't say shit. I have to say stuff. Yeah. I guess you're enjoying it. I hope so. In the description, there's like a description that comes along. If you download the podcast, there'll be a description that goes along with it. And in that description, there are things for you to check out where you can interact with me and other like-minded people. Yes! There are links to Twitter and Facebook. The Facebook group is growing, and recently through polls, they decided what I will do with certain characters. See? It's all interactive and shit. It's great, isn't it? Today we're going to get all mystical and bollocks. I hope you enjoy mystical bollocks. It's always good bollocks, isn't it? Mystical bollocks. A visit from the Allfather. My name is Thorstein, and I'm an Ostman. I'm 15 winters and already a man of respect. I am paired with the wolf soul Fenrir. I've told you all this before. For days now we've been watched by two black birds, two ravens have been following our every move and have been with us every hour of every day, it seems. If we can't see them, we can hear the rustle and the flutter of wings. We can see the flash of eyes even in the darkness, the shadows in the light. They seem to be listening and watching. They are the harbingers of one man, one of the gods. The god you know as Odin. I know him more as Aldafor, the Allfather. 3 days have passed since a man knocked on our door. My mother, never one to fear, welcomed the stranger, as all the Norse should. This was already strange, as with my new abilities and senses, I normally would have been aware of the man entering our steadings long before he reached our threshold. I would have greeted him before he got to our door. My family would have been prepared for his arrival. We're not. The man was old but hearty. His age, I couldn't guess. He wore a long woolen cloak, and his clothes were fine and those of a man who was of a noble background. He told my family that he was going through the lands to seek and meet the next great king of the Ostman. He wanted to come alone to offer his support and fealty. Who knew? My parents welcomed him and asked him to share news of his journey. He introduced himself as Gestir, or in your language, stranger. This had a different emphasis in our time. It meant stranger, but I think it is the root word for your guest, Gestir. This was not rude of him to give an obviously false name. It was part of our hospitality to accept his name and not question his decision. As he settled, he was barraged for news, where he'd been and what the happenings of that place were. He cleverly managed to change the subject from his topic very quickly as we children entered the room. Fen and I noticed this. This man was clever. Sif, my sister, was 2 summers and a babbling ball of energy and delight, a tiny blonde-haired version of my mother, already strong-willed and quick. Eric, my younger brother, was inquiry and excitement. The stranger was pleased with their presence, which endeared him to my mother instantly. We all sat for our evening meal together. At this point, he turned towards me and smiled as he ate from his board. He drank nothing. Again, maybe a hint of who he was for those who know the sagas. I am looking for the one who will claim the new lands, east and west. The greatest of heroes he will be, he said, chewing the roasted goat that had been offered. At this point, my wolf soul was by me, considering this man. Hospitality is an important part of the culture, but Fen was unsure of this man's intentions. He was unsure if it was a man at all. He doesn't really feel real. He feels false. He radiates falsehood and mirth. Could this be that Loki you've told me about? You've told me stories of him, and it kind of fits. I think not, I sent back telepathically. I think this is the one who can not drink without Loki. At this, the man turned and made eye contact with the giant wolf's soul. No, I am not Loki, he sent to both of us, then continued speaking with my parents as though nothing had happened. The room had seemed frozen in that moment. Fen and I were brought to silence, and within that silence, quiet thought. I sipped from my cup and ate while the charismatic man told my family stories of the amazing deeds of the gods' doings. The stories we had heard before, but they always delighted us. I usually would be excited to hear the sagas told by a fresh mouth, but with this man I wasn't sure. There was so much more to this stranger than I knew. I would have to keep an eye on this one. Time passed and the adults got merry with their mead. They laughed and chatted. Risque subjects were discussed in front of the children, and my mother was complimented for her beauty, for her home, and for her children. I watched and waited. I weighed and assessed. This man would not fool me. He had communicated directly with Fen, and that was never done. Had that actually happened, or was it a figment of my imagination? No one can see Fen apart from me. No, that really happened, confirmed Fenrir. No more was addressed to us before the man asked his permission to bed down and sleep beside the fire. My mother cleared the general detritus of the evening with the help of my brother. My father went out to tend to the last few chores before the door was fastened against the night. The stranger watched me with great consideration when we were left as much on our own as we could be in this home. I make an offer to you, he said. In 3 days, I want you to make your way to the highest point you can see from your home. In the last of the evening's light, he pointed to the top of a mountain. We could see it through the open lodge door. We could see it in the distance. If you can get there by this time in 3 nights, I will give you everything you wish for. He smiled, and turning, pulled his hat over his eyes. No more was said. It took me a lot to get to the top of this fucking hell, and I had no idea if the man had been taking the piss out of me or not, but I wanted everything, so I couldn't miss this opportunity. The man himself had gone from the hearth in the morning after his stay. Even the door was still tired, but my mother and father commented, half joking, how they'd been visited by one of the Jotir. Fen and I smiled at this, because we knew which one. Well, I say it was hard to scale this peak, but with my wolf soul's aid, I can choose to be a wolf at will. A wolf has no difficulty with this journey, and we get there many hours earlier than the evening of the 3rd day. We now sit bored at the top of the mountain. It affords a great view of the local area, but even that gets a little dull after the time. Then the clouds form below in the valley, eventually rising up and hiding us inside them. Is this the man's plan? Or maybe the gods, to bore us into leaving? If I were just human, I wouldn't be able to find my way home from here. If I was just human, the temperature and the falling rain would kill us with the cold and wetness it brings. As a wolf, I lie and snooze, cozy in my black pelt, sensing the world through my hearing and smell. I hear the white-tailed eagle screech his homecoming to his roost and feel the nest is full of young. I smell the passing of the lynx and the hare. I wouldn't have expected them at this height, but they've been here recently. A bear bellows in the distance, but the rain is the predominant sound as it strikes the ground and the foliage with what seems some angry vengeance. Then darkness falls and we grow annoyed at the world, but settle beneath the shelter of a pile of stones near the summit. knowing nothing will get close to us or reach the peak without waking us and getting our interest. Then, I suddenly wake up. The rain has stopped and the cloud layer has gone. The night is full of the embers and sparks of muspellium arranged in the patterns and travelling the paths given to them by the gods. I find them comforting, much more comforting than the murky world that pressed into me before. I think you call them the stars. One of those stars drops from the sky and, fizzing and burning, comes to a stop at a short distance from me now. It hangs above the ground at about my seated eye level. It sits like a floating fire ember in the night. Fen and I are entirely focused on it. We get up and move towards it, being careful on my forepaws and taking my time. We are wary of the fire spark burning before us. Sensible in this case. It suddenly pops like the damp log on fire and embers fly in every direction. I jump as a reflex and turn away from the bright spark. The flashes ruin my night vision and it takes a while before I can see it. Where the sparkling star had been was now empty space. I cannot describe what I saw very well. Not empty, but in the air was like a small hole. It was as though the burning thing had burnt a hole through it. Well, to somewhere else. The hole grew larger. Now it was the span of a man's hand, and I made my way towards it. It didn't feel dangerous in any way. I just had to have a look. Curiosity had got the better of me. We eventually held our wolf eye to what seemed like a hole in a wall. It was as though I was looking into another room from the gigantic one I was in. It felt like I was like looking into a world next door. The spark had burnt a hole from this one to another. Was this real? Was I still asleep? Was I dreaming this? Fenrir and I were both confused. He can generally reassure me at times like this, but he had no idea what was going on either, so he kind of joined me in awe at what we saw. Through the gap, we saw flashes of a gigantic golden shining hall with gates that could fit 100 men shoulder to shoulder. Above the monstrous doors, a giant wolf, and above him there was an eagle riding on the thermals. These two creatures are, again, gigantic and seem to be watching over the men as they march forth. What is this place? We ask one another in our heads, what is this place? Even though we are the same being and have the same thoughts within that being, we ask each other. This must be I believe this is the Hall of the Slain. We see a sea of men with a sea of spears with shining points and shining armour. Then we hear harsh squawking and the battering of wings as something hits and pushes against the view hole. We move away and a soft black body births its way into this world, followed by another. The raven's thoughts and memory come from the other world, and they land before me, staring at me only as a craven raven can. I can sense their overwhelming intelligence, and they view me in silence for a moment, seeming to work me out for what I am. I can feel them look at me and into me. Birds are just so different from those furry, non-feathered animals. These creatures move too quickly and twitch and snap their wings. They study me and then start making a fuss as they seem to fight between themselves. They're pretty mesmerizing. The feathers are black, but they've got this kind of, I suppose you call it iridescence of a black rainbow of sorts. Flashes of bright and vivid, unnatural colours are seen as they flash their wings and flutter about. And then, sudden silence and stillness. They just stand and stare at us silently and unmoving. It's much more disturbing than the uncontrolled movements they had been displaying previously. They stare, and they seem to be looking into us. Once satisfied, they flit away in silence on black wings, circling above us before diving back through the hole in the air. Then nothing but the wind and the hilltop. We sit and stare at where or what was a hole. It's gone. We keep our distance now as a new sound is heard. A fresh tear opens the gap again and the noise increases. A vast black eye becomes visible momentarily as it pressed to the gap and it looks at us, and a snarl starts. The eye disappears to be replaced by a large black nose, a nose of a bear or maybe a wolf? No, much too large for a wolf. It sniffs the air on this side of the world's wall and, seemingly satisfied, starts to push its way through the gap. It tears through the barrier until a giant wolf's head hangs in the air like those trophies in the Jarl's Lodge. It stops for a moment to look and listen to us, and then it continues its difficult journey until it stands before us, shaking its great grey, scarred, shaggy pelt. I feel its age more than I see it, and it gives me the sense of a world-weary old man as it stands before me. It is so much larger than us, and we're well above an average man's height from paws tip to ear tip. Behind it, another wolf head starts the same journey. This wolf is different. It's white and young with beautiful blue eyes and seems to be the complete opposite of the other. It offers excitement and wonder in its eyes, and eventually the two most enormous creatures I've ever seen stand before me. They don't offer any threat. They offer nothing. Neither offers any scent either of any kind. They just stand and watch. I don't know which is which, but these must be Odin's wolves, Freki and Geri, the greedy and the ravenous. The giant white wolf sniffs the ground around the portal. As it does this, it keeps eye contact with us, but once satisfied, it lifts its head and moves to sit down next to the other. We stare uncomfortably now at each other before we all turn on some cue to the space in the air before us. The hole gets larger and the two birds barrel through it again, shockingly, and croaking and squawking to take a weird orbit whirling around us. The gap starts to pulse, and in the distance I can see a dark shadow-cloaked man walking towards me. The figure is weary and leans on a staff. I cannot see any features at this point, just I can sense his exhaustion. I recognise the man from the night before, still in his guise as the wanderer, not the warrior. I take this as a huge compliment. He doesn't need to impress me, and probably realises that even he would find it difficult to impress cynical little me. Odin. He comes as an old man, eventually arriving at the gap where we see him as a whole. His cloak is blue wool with rich fur lining. His staff is a many-twisted bow. He labours before the hole for a moment, and he seems to prepare for a step so large. From one world to another, it looks like a small gap to me, but who knows how big it really is? How far apart are worlds? The hood he wears falls over his face to eye level, leaving most of his face in shadow, but we can see some of it. His left eye is closed and surprisingly unscarred. I always imagined it as being this scarred, missing hole. He's really not how I imagined Odin to be, yet I know exactly who he is. He stands before me and leans on his staff and wipes his mouth with the other arm. Fen and I, as one, stand in awe. He nods to me before turning to the wolves and patting each on the head. As he leans his walking staff to one side, he sits on a large boulder between the two beasts. They lay down as he makes himself comfy. All now settle. His hands keep tickling those giant heads as he focuses on me. The ravens now land, one atop the staff, one on the man's shoulder. He turns to his head to one of them as it briefly ducks to his rising hand. Once the ravens are perched, he rests his elbows on his knees and leans towards me and strokes his long beard between his finger and thumb as he regards me. I think he's going to speak, but he does not. He stares at me in silence. We feel, God, I've no idea what we feel. Too many things pass through my head. I can't limit to one emotional state. Can we see both of you? He asks. His voice is soft and sighing of the wind of branches, so we transform. He sits back laughing, and for a moment the boulder seems to be a great golden throne with a giant golden armoured man sitting upon it before it returns to the large rock that it is. Smiling, he leans forward and again strokes his beard in silence. The animals around him are slightly unnerving. They don't move or do anything but just stare at us. What is it you want of me, Wolf? You came, so you must want something, and I have come to see you. He laughed again. You interest me with this one. And he pointed at Fenrir the posit. I can see he's a little uncomfortable at this level of scrutiny. Then more laughter as he turns to the white wolf, which gets its nose stroked with a gentle caress before Odin sits back on his seat and drums his fingers on his knees as yet again he just examines us. Another age passes before he points at Fen and genially asks him, What are you, my friend? His voice is warm and friendly, and he does show a genuine interest in the posit. Fen looks at me and starts to send me a question telepathically before he does. The god stops him with a harumph. Yeah, you heard that right, an actual harumph. Only gods and, I don't know, fucking Gandalf can actually harumph. I can hear you, pup. You forget maybe that I am a god. Speak plainly to me what you are and why you're here. I see why you are with this one, he says, pointing at me. Fen looks a little lost. This shit never happens to my wolf soul. I'd never known him befuddled and quiet. I'm the soul of a long-past wolf given to a human to save my own and his life. I'm a dusha in what I think you call the Russian language, a soul of being. Why? Asked Odin. Why, what? Says the confused wolf. Odin smiles and acts as though he was dealing with someone, or in this case with something that was hard of thinking. He harumphed again. I tried to harumph myself quietly, but got a disapproving look from God and Posit, but both were seeming a little bit disappointed in me. I smiled, slightly embarrassed. Why become a free soul and half of this skin changer? It feels as though you shouldn't exist. I know naught of you. Do you have kin? Yeah, I have kin. They live deep in the mountains far to the east from here. The winters there are even more severe than here, and it was one of those winters that saw the creation of the werewolves. It was out of a mutual need for survival. My pack and the human pack were at their ends, so we became this to survive. Ah, smiled the god as he cast a small piece of something into the air, and a blackbird snatched it on the wing. This mesmerised me for a moment, and I wanted to throw a scrap for the raven. The god sat silently stroking his beard again. He could hear my thoughts. Ah, makes sense now then. I offer you this world now if you will help me fight for mine when the time is right. I will need a great leader for my armies, and you will be the first of the Ulfana, my wolf skins. I feel your power and have spoken to the Norns, who say your fate is long and full of valour and vigour, and it is intertwined with mine. If you accept my proposal, I will help you in your journey. What do you say? Fen and I looked at each other for a moment. There was no point thinking about it. We're in. Thanks for listening. That was another Viking podcast. As I say, next time I'm probably going to come back to the future just to have a little bit of a break from the Vikingness. If you have any questions or anything, just join us on Twitter or whatever and ask him. And yeah, there's books on there. Remember, Gregory's book is still available and is wonderful, and his second book's coming out soon, so support him as well. I'll leave a link in the description. And to those who've listened this far, and only you people who've listened this far, the truth is, I love you. Bye.